Yes?
I find if I don't fight, I start to fall asleep.
Yes.
And so I'm
good.
in this trap of either fighting to concentrate, which doesn't even work very well.
Yep.
Or falling asleep.
Excellent. This is very common. This is very, very common. And it is, it may be sad to face this, but it's important to face it nonetheless. Most of us, for most people, it's not just you, for most people, the only thing that keeps them awake is anxiety. That is the state of the world that we're in right now. Our lives are so boring. We care so little about what we do. The only way we stay awake is with anxiety. And you're seeing that. The moment you stop fighting, you fall asleep. Just like that. It's unfortunate that we've come to this point. It's not necessary, it's not required, it's not even, you could say, normal. But it's the state of the world today. So it's good for you to face that. It's very good to face that. And it's difficult to get out of it. We fight within our experience, and we fight with the circumstances, and we fight and we fight. And it's important to know for ourselves and also to forgive others that for most of us, the only thing that seems to have meaning is fighting. It's the only thing that seems to be effective at keeping us engaged. And we don't want to sink into this, you could say, depression. So we use anxiety to... Depression here just means lack of consciousness. We're not engaged, and then we, quote, fall asleep. So we bring forth fighting with ourselves and others, and it's an unfortunate fact, but if we know it for ourselves, we can forgive it in ourselves and others, and then we actually take action. And the action is, of course, you do this technique. You do the technique. You are clear about what is happening. The main thing there in terms of clarity, the big point in terms of clarity regarding staying awake, is that you, and yes, it's true, we ask you to label and have a thought about it. We do that. But that's just because the thinking mind is so active, we want to give it something to do. I give it a task. But the most important thing for staying awake is that you have the experience rather than the thought about it. If you have the experience directly, it's fascinating. The thought about it is extremely boring. But the experience as you have it is actually, it's unknown. And something that's unknown is exciting. It's totally unknown. If you think it is something, well, then it's difficult. The reason we say something like seeing is that seeing is a thought that is explicitly boring. See that? There's no doubt that you see the floor and then you say seeing. That is a boring thought about the experience. And so hopefully it'll keep you on the experience rather than a thought about it, such as, oh yeah, it's actually a pretty interesting pattern they burned into this floor. I wonder what equipment they used for that. Which would seem to be a thought that is interesting. Yes? But it is not. And so you fall asleep. So instead of that, you have this experience of the, quote, floor, of, quote, seeing. But is it even a floor? You don't even know yet. Are you even seeing? Well, what is that? You don't even know that. There's just this experience, and it emerges completely unknown, an experience you've never had before, and it is interesting. So for me, I know in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, if I can only not think, I cannot fall asleep. I can't, even if I try. The only way for most of us that we know how to fall asleep is by having subtle, boring thoughts. And if you cut those off, then this moment is absolutely fascinating. And the only time you fall asleep is when you're tired, which is appropriate. You should fall asleep when you're tired. So, in terms of clarity, that's the point. Okay? In terms of concentration, the point is you bring forth more and more energy to drive your attention right into whatever it is you're focusing on. And you do that effortfully. So you really bring forth energy. Don't hold back. Don't think, well, I think it's going to be fine. No. You need more energy than you have. That's how much energy you need. More. It's always just more. It's very simple. You don't have enough energy. That's it. Bring forth more energy. And the way I, again, think about it for myself is I'm going to start the period and I'm going to note, not forcing, I'm not trying to force anything here. It's fine. I don't need that much energy. I don't have to make anything special happen. It's okay. Relax. Okay? But wait. That's the initial attitude. But then all I do is I increase the amount of energy and intention, in every next noting. So every next one has a bit more energy than the one before. Now there are two things to say about it. One, you want to increase that as little as possible because you have hundreds before the period ends. And you want the last one, and then right before the bell rings, that should be the one of most energy in the entire period. Okay? So you actually want to keep the increase very small. Just marginal increase every time, but every time you bring forth more energy. And generally, after just a few minutes, you feel like you're done. You can't go further. And yet, you can. And that becomes the thing that's actually most fascinating. How can I focus even more completely this time than 1 or 2 seconds ago? And then, even if you achieve it, you have to do it again within a few seconds. So that's a huge challenge, and it's a challenge that keeps us energized. But the last one, actually, equanimity, is even more helpful for staying awake than either of these. And both of these are very helpful for staying awake. The clarity one being the natural way in which everything is fascinating, unless we try to make it into a thought that we're already familiar with. The second being that we're going to increase the energy, and beyond that, we're going to walk this adventure of learning how to make even more energy than we knew how to make. So in both ways, it's lifting us up. But then this one is the one that really helps, because this is the one that's most vulnerable. And if you're feeling vulnerable, you're probably going to be able to stay awake. So that is, if you have enough equanimity, and this might not seem all that risky up front, but it can become terrifying quite quickly. If you have enough equanimity, then you're really open to whatever might happen in this meditation period. If you stop blocking off both the fear of the awful things within our hearts that are just waiting to come out if we would stop oppressing them, and also the incredible wonder of being alive, this shocking, incomprehensible miracle. If we stop blocking off those kinds of experiences, simply because we have equanimity and so we're open to everything, then we realize that we're not safe here. The person who has been held together through protecting myself from myself and the world, if we have equanimity, that person is not going to survive this meditation period. Because all the terrible things that I don't want to admit about myself will come out. And all the wonderful things that I don't want to admit about myself will come out. And all the terrible things that I don't want to admit about the world will come out. And all the wonderful things about the world that I don't want to admit to myself will come out. It will become clear. And when we enter a place of sufficient equanimity that we're willing to receive exactly this, completely open to it, then we see that it isn't that some big thing has to happen in order to shatter our sense of self. Only this is sufficient to shatter our sense of self. Just this. This right here doesn't support my sense of self. This alone already. And so in becoming open in that way, everything becomes shocking. And I'll finish by saying that's the main reason we get sleepy when we sit, to prevent that from happening. It's an intentional act. Our minds produce drowsiness to be sure that we don't have that experience of true openness. Because if we did, our hearts would be blown open. And that is not, for most of us, what we are looking for. As Aitken Roshi once said, that when you come to a retreat, you will get what you came for. If you came for enlightenment, you will get enlightened. If you came here to survive, you will survive. I think it's a wonderful way to describe meditation. You will survive if that's your ultimate goal. It's okay, you're just sitting here for a week. You can survive that, if you want to. And so when something in us starts coming forth and says, yeah, I want to know. I want to know. What is this? And it starts to open up. Other parts of us will want to find ways, and drowsiness is just a very effective way. When something starts to, when the unknown starts to emerge, drowsiness is a nice way to close that off for long enough that it will go away and the period will end and we'll be at lunch and it'll be fine. And so to just open up to whatever it is, to just open to whatever it is that's happening right now. And the important thing is, it is this. If you're looking, if you say, oh good, how about this terrible part of myself that I really do want to know? That's not equanimity. That's still you in charge. And that isn't the thing I'm talking about. You open up to exactly this. And it starts off very reasonably not seeming that threatening. But if you keep opening and opening and opening, and you don't need some big terrible experience to be a revelation. It is just this that is the revelation.